We must have questions for these two fabulous women. And I'm going to help direct questions to the both of them. Anyone? Yeah.
Sure. I've got a question for Jamie. Speaking about the variances in level of gravity on the Earth's surface, I'm curious, is it related to crust density, altitude, different combinations? And part two of that, is there any discernible, differences? Like, could somebody jump a measurable distance higher in a certain spot? I mean, even if it's really negligible.
Sure. Part of it has to do with things like you mentioned, so like the density of the crust or the height of a mountain. The gravitational pull is incredibly sensitive to the distance between the two masses, and so it's actually the 1/r². Anytime we square something, that number can get really big really fast. So when you divide by that, it becomes really small really fast. So some of it is variations like that. The other thing is that the Earth isn't actually a round, perfect ball. And it actually is an ellipsoid. It's slightly smushed. And that smush is because of the gravitational pull of the sun. And so that also impacts how gravity varies across the surface of the Earth. So it is measurable, but that doesn't necessarily mean it would be perceivable by humans. So we can measure it with really fine equipment, but you wouldn't necessarily notice that you're jumping any higher, although you can go ahead and tell yourself that that's totally fine.
I think you had another question, but I'm just putting my hand up to get third in line.
Didn't you have a second one?
That was the second one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So can you put in percent? 1%, 0.5%?
Oh, the variation?
Yeah.
It's probably 5% or less variation across the Earth. Yeah.
5%?
But that's still, again, we're talking pretty small numbers here, and not something that humans can really perceive in our day-to-day life.
Is that within the margin of error?
Is that Steve?
It's outside the margin of error, yes.
Other questions?
You talked about black holes and how they were kind of converging, and they caused the ripples that went out in space. So what happens when space ripples? What's the effect of that?
The same that you see in ripples on water. So you can actually see that. And so we might have these gravitational waves passing through us right now. And again, human perception is incredibly limited, which is why we needed those giant, mile-long arms that are 2,000 miles apart in order to detect that difference. But it quite literally is rippling just like it does across the surface of water, just in all directions.
Malcolm.
Question for Shelley. Most, if not all of your paintings are very, what I would call quiet. Babbling brook is about as loud as your paintings get. No waterfalls.
No, I used to do a lot more energetic work that would have probably been really attracted to waterfalls, and I've done, when I'm sketching, I've done some studies of small waterfalls, and I've got interested in turbulent water and all this kind of stuff, and like crossing over into your territory. But I like being near waterfalls, but the energy of it is too much to want to put down in a drawing these days. I like my work being much more flowing, and because it makes me feel like that too, and I've got to the point in my life now that I don't want to create work either for myself or for anybody else that's kind of distressing in any way. So this is what feels right now.
Terry.
This has to do with your travels in the Celtic history. I noticed in the northwest of Spain, you didn't mention that there's a lot of Celtic symbols everywhere.
Yeah, well, they went all the way out through Europe and through Italy and France and Spain. So it's that influence is everywhere. Like I said, we're migratory people. So you find that influence all over the place. But Yeah, and, you know, and people would, you know, take certain things, you know, like objects, whether it was from warfare or trade or theft, out and out, you know, things get moved around, don't they?
Absolutely.
And some of the best Celtic music is in Galicia.
Yeah, that's where all the symbols are everywhere.
Wow.
Very, very, actually, they tried to become part of the Celtic, whatever you call it.
I think the UK.
Yeah, but they were refused.
Oh, wow.
I think at first they were accepted, and then they said, no, you really don't meet all the qualifications for some reason, so no, you're out.
It's that R squared.
I think it's because the wine was too cheap.
Maybe.
Anyone else? Other questions? Yeah.
For Shelley, you've talked about how throughout your life you've been drawn to water. Can you speak to how you feel when you're not near water?
I feel a bit lost, actually. When we were traveling in the desert, when we went on a road trip, well, Taylor and I met traveling and climbing and everything. And it was the first time I'd been in the desert before, and it was weird. You know, it was a bit unsettling. It took me quite a long time to even get used to the vegetation and to sort of befriend it. You know, it took me a long time, and just that, you know, your body just being dry, you know, that all of the physical sensation of being really dry. But then, you know, I noticed when I go back to Wales or go to the Bay Area or something like that, and then suddenly I'm sort of super saturated again, and it's like, whoa, this is really different in it. And I had never really appreciated how much of an impact that it makes on how you feel in your day to day, whether you're in a damp or a dry environment. And I feel like Tahoe is the sort of just right for me, because it's like bodies of water. It's dry, but it's not too dry. You know, we're close to the desert if we want that kind of open experience, but still got the kind of intimacy of the valleys and everything here. You know, it's nice, isn't it? Yeah.
I think our next talk is going to have to be water.
I think so.
I have a question. How did this collaboration begin? I kind of want to know what was the impetus for bringing together physics and your paintings. You want to?
So I've always been a lover of art. My sister's an artist. I minored in art history, and so it's
Okay.
again, I'm drawn to that, again, that creativity, that gift of communication. And so in meeting Shelley and starting to, you know, appreciate her work and the work of other artists in Tahoe, she and I just started talking, and so it's what I'd call a synergistic collision. And so as we talked more and more, the things that we talked about just kept coming together in this really nice way. And so I think we decided that it was something that would be worthy of sharing.
That's great.
There's a book as well called Art Physics that it's by Leonard Schlein, familiar with?
Yeah.
And it just changed everything for me. There's a chapter in it about the Asian sort of perception of time.
Yep.
That's standing by a river, you know, and it's like, do you want to explain it? Because do you understand? I don't know if you understand it better than me, but it was basically like the idea that, you know, in our Western view of the past, present, and future, we would maybe sort of stand looking at the river and imagine that, you know, the future is, you know, the water that is to come. But in the Asian perspective, you imagine that you're standing, so the river's flowing like this, and you're to the side of it. So the past is in front of you, but the future is behind you, flowing past you, and the present moment is right to your side, right here. So what you're looking at is, you know, this like the past is running away from you, and spending a lot of time standing by the river and, you know, drawing it and thinking about things, that really shook my world, really, because I was like, you know, there's a really completely new way for me to understand time and memories, and that's why, you know, I talk about memory so much when I'm talking about my work and the river and everything, because, you know, it helped me to understand things very differently.
Well, it's a great collaboration.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? Yeah, in the back.
So for Shelley, I was wondering, are you painting outside usually? Like if it's a nice day on your walk at the river, do you paint at the river?
Yeah, I do.
Oh,
yeah,
that's beautiful.
Yeah. I sketch. So I have my sketchbooks. So on the days when I just want to just be more spontaneous and just, allow anything to just go in there, I'll take one of my sketchbooks. But if I want to create a finished, more of a finished piece, I've got this trolley dolly, like the old lady cart thing. It's just got quite chunky wheels. And I drive that along, and then I've got a little kind of portable easel and things like that in there. And you just kind of start to dial in your setup over the years, don't you? So yeah, no, I set up right out there. Yeah.
That's nice. I didn't know if it was based off a photograph, but that's cool to do.
I do that too. Yeah, so I take photographs as well, and I have a little monitor in my studio, but I don't want to create, like painted photographs, so I have the sketches nearby, and so that it reminds me of how it felt to be in that place at that time. All of the sounds, and I'll stick little things in there as well to remind me, so that it's kind of like a partly from memory, partly from the photograph, and partly just sort of letting just whatever feelings come out and drive the marks at the time as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I had one also for you, Jamie.
Oh, sure.
The very last slide you showed was kind of like a flower shape or like a trumpet. Is that the shape that they believe the universe is?
That is actually an interpretation of the shape of each mass. So it's called a gravitational well. And so it's a mathematical description of how space is bent and shifted as a result of that mass. So you get a deeper well for a bigger mass.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yes, in the back.
You mentioned that the ripples that are caused by the black holes are imperceptible to humans. What about to animals, fish, birds, reptiles?
Probably also I can't confirm that because I don't have an experimental way to do so. But likely imperceptible to animals as well, just because of the scale. That's not to say that things like variations in the gravitational field across the Earth, and we know that things like migratory birds and other animals are actually very tuned into the electromagnetic field. So another force that's quite a bit stronger than the Earth's gravitational field. So it would be an interesting study, and now of course I'm trying to think of how we determine that. But likely not perceptible because it is so subtle, but it depends.
One more.
Shelley, do you think do you see yourself taking any of the insights on gravity and somehow applying them into your visual art?
Absolutely, yeah. My wheels are already turning now, but I won't know for a little bit how that would, sort of dovetail with my observations, and it's one of those, I'll let it kind of percolate in for a little while, and then it'll just come around spontaneously. Yeah.
And then there'll be a couple years of space paintings.
And why not?
Shelley, there's a lot of gravity in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Keep Shelley out of space.
All right, well, thank you so much, and I think we've had a real treat this evening.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you, Phyllis, so much for coming out and getting over your jet lag just in time. Phyllis has just come back from Italy.
Oh, wow.
So, yes. Thank
My
you
pleasure.
so much.
This was my absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah. Please.